What is this? Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. Um, all right. And okay. I'm all over the place right now. I gotta get some stuff together. Where is the thing at? Uh, let's put this in here. I need to start doing this ahead of time. At the real Dana. Okay. Let's see. Share, mention. I was putting something in the jumbotron. Um, and also let me. Can you guys share out this space? I don't know who all these people are, but I'm sending them something anyway. All right. Oh, and most importantly, let me send it to the judge. Um, copy link. All right. Sign on now. Started. Okay. All right. Testing, testing. All right. Can you guys hear me again? Just somebody do a thumbs up. I'm constantly doing a test. So I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. Can I get a thumbs up from somebody? It could be even a thumb. Thank you. 100. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, PHX. Thank you, conserving. Thank you, guys. All right. So we're just waiting for the judge to come. And I sent him the link. Busy day today. Because I did at the last minute I realized I have to go out of town and I really don't want to, but I have to, apparently. So um I just been all over the place. And please share out this space. Question: was slavery a necessary evil? I gotta change it. Is why I'm going to change it to was and is it necessary? Was is slavery a necessary evil? Hi, man cave.
Hey,
And of
what's up?
course,
Oh, sorry.
hi. No. I can. That's good. I can hear you. I just want to say this real quick. And of course, we could talk about whatever's going on in the news with Trump if you guys want to. The hottest thing now that's trending are these campus protests and the illegal migrants, right? But go ahead, man cave. You want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to make sure that we were going to get a chance to speak with you and the judge. I live right here in Columbia, and I got a lot to say, and I got some information that might be beneficial for you and everyone. 'Cause I'm right here in the heart of it.
Columbia, where? Oh, the university.
Yeah, where it all started. It all started here. So it's not.
Right. You
It's
a
not even.
student?
No, I just live here. I just live in the neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, if y'all like, I got some information about like what's going on, not like CNN bullshit. Or I'm sorry. I know not
Right.
to cuss,
Hmm.
but yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that we can get a chance to speak with the judge and you tonight. That's it.
Yeah, all the spaces, people get a chance to
Okay.
speak, and
Thank you.
yeah, that's one of the things why we hold the spaces. He talks to the subject, and then people request to come up, talk about the subject or whatever they wanted to bring up. That may be going on in current events or the news. So yeah, definitely. Um, Yeah, because I don't like the narrative. They're trying to say it's a lot of outside agitators, and I think it's majority of the students that's standing up for what they believe. And it's not just, it's Columbia, it's Emory, USC, UT, University of what, Texas, Harvard, Yale, all these schools. What is it now? Who is it? Chapel Hill, UNC Chapel Hill. So yeah, you pay all this goddamn money. Why not exercise your constitutional right? Camp out, and that's what. And the judge actually sides with the student protesters because that's what his generation did. That's what they were known for, being radical. Shit, they're young. They could easily bounce back on their feet. They could, if they get expelled, they go to another college and you get your degree and you move on with your life. That's one of the luxuries of being young. Mess up now, you got time to fix it. Well, we all do, as long as you wake up in the morning. But shout out to the students, honey, standing up for what they believe in. But man cave, if you living in the neighborhood, I mean, is it like a lot of chaos? Are they
Yeah,
getting on your
it's
nerves?
chaos. Like I mean, I hear what you're saying and everything, but uh, man, it's a mess. Like they just started getting them out today. The police just started barricading everything. I want to say maybe like 4 hours ago. So I mean, you got residents that are from New York City. It's Dana. I think you're from New Jersey, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you already know how it is with a lot of outer towners. I'm not from New York, but I didn't go to school here either. So I mean, but they're upset. The residents are like, well, if you don't appreciate your education, kind of let some of us city folks we'll be glad to take what you don't appreciate. So that's kind of the vibe that's in the city here. Like I don't know. I'm really interested in I was surprised to hear that you said the judge was siding with him, so I will be very interested to hear what he has to say.
Yeah,
And
I mean, because
maybe he can
what
change my
is
opinion because he's a
but
very knowledgeable
okay,
man.
so why oh yeah, so why it takes him a minute to log on because of the connection. But why okay, what is your problem with them protesting? I see you, April. Okay, I got your message. Go ahead, man.
I don't. I mean, it's something new all the time here in New York. I mean, you have a lot, like you just named off a bunch of schools who are kind of like piggybacking it, and the message is getting lost. The value is becoming diminished. The more like, what are I think it's gone from. Let me read a text here from a student who's actually from there. Give me 1 second. He
I don't
says.
think the message. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
He says. They're quote unquote wilding out now. This has nothing to do with Palestine anymore. This is a Columbia student. They're just trying to make as much noise as possible. They know this whole thing is leading nowhere. So they want to go out with a bang. And I mean, whatever. I'll just wait for the judge to get here and hear what he has to say because I mean,
Yeah,
Hey, what's up,
because
Dana?
hi, give me 1 second, Ricky. Um, I say this because media switches things, and that's media creates propaganda. I learned about propaganda in fifth grade with my elementary school teacher before there was such thing as the internet or social media. However, they're going to belittle, they're going to try and twist the narrative. They're going to say, well, there are outsiders who are not students that are being the real
I
agitators.
can't
And
really rule that out, Dana. I'm sorry. Like, I
well,
can't really rule that out.
I'm going to because the majority of the protesters, the majority of these young people doing the press conferences, whether it's in Emory, whether it's on the West Coast, East Coast, they are the students. They're telling you, no, don't believe these mainstream medias. They're lying. They're not even reporting what is actually happening to us with whether it's the state troopers or the police or whatever. No, it is us. We organized it. We are out here and we want to stay out here.
Who's paying them to like that stuff costs money and they're college kids.
What
So
stuff costs money?
well to organize all this stuff and the
No,
tents
it
that they're
don't.
well the tents
That's
cost money.
propaganda.
That doesn't cost money. These kids, listen, a lot of them probably they could mute up for this
Yeah, they got
echo.
some rich kids at Columbia. I get it.
No,
I'm
no, it's
trying to
not.
play it
It's not even
fair.
a.
I
It's
don't.
not even about the
Go
rich
ahead.
kids. It's about these kids. It's easy to go get a tent. So they don't, and that's why there a lot of there. I heard in Colombia, mute up for a second because it's an echo. Are you on speaker?
Nah, that's my dog. I'm sorry.
Um, so they're saying at Columbia, the university is trying to block off a barricade to let in, I guess, food come in. I guess people giving them food or whatever. But the fact is that no, these are resourceful students. It's you don't need a whole bunch of money to go out there and protest. You just need the will to do it and stick with it and understand the sacrifice that come with that. They did this in the 90s when people were divesting for the South Africans to end apartheid. Oh, they damn sure did it in the 60s and 70s. Kent University. Those are just like the known ones, right? But it protests always been, you know, um, I would say alive and active, particularly on college campuses. Actually, I would say this. I would say protests on college campuses has been relatively dead up until now. I think a lot of students they should be protesting a whole bunch of other stuff, like the billions of dollars going to Ukraine. So I'm with the students and especially at these Ivy Leagues where you want the best and the brightest, to be these creative, mind thinkers, but you want to suppress what they're standing up for. So you see the hypocrisy when it comes to not just institutions, the educational institutions, but this damn government. It's really the government's fault, but now the students are being blamed for the Israeli government and United States government for causing this mess. And Hamas. So basically, government is causing this genocide against the Palestinians, and harm against some Jewish people. It's really the government. So why are we blaming the students? But go ahead, Ricky.
Crazy what happened. I'm proud of the students. I think they're standing up for what's right. And I think we should learn a lesson from this that you could really get these politicians scared. If you look at Biden, he's changed his position a little bit. You look at the media, they're panicking and they're really making the state look like what it is. It's an abusive system when you're attacking the students and attacking the professors. And a lot of what we see in this escalation, I believe that there's operatives in there. There's been people who are saying things in front of the cameras to make the protesters look bad. And now what happened at Columbia yesterday, it looks like they're trying to escalate it to shut down the protests. But the protesters, I think they're going to stand strong and they're not going to fall for it. And we really got to change our Middle East policy before it catches up with us because over the last 30 years, we've dropped trillions of dollars fighting for Israel. There's a lot of censorship going on. And I'm glad the students are standing up and I support them. Just want to start with that.
Yeah, and because for a while now, when you look at college students, even high school students, their mind is so contrived and so dictated. They're not they lack independent thinking, creativity. So to see this happening, it's like, okay, um, I'm just talking plain here. It's like, okay, maybe they're coming to the realization I need to start thinking for myself, speaking for myself, and sticking up for myself and my generation and what is going on to us, the people, So it's really the people against the government. But media, particularly controlled media like CNN, Fox, and MSNBC, they change the narrative so much because of the CEOs or the owners of these media corporations who are in bed with government. So they're trying to spin it and pushing out all types of propaganda to make the students look like the villains. And it's really the government that's the villain here. Something has to happen. And then before these students started protesting, what was it? Every week, every weekend, or every day during the week, not only in the United States, but throughout this world, especially in the Western Hemisphere, Palestinians been taken to the streets in the thousands, hundreds of thousands since October 7th. So this just didn't start. It's just that, okay, let's get the youth involved. And when we go through history, which is why we're going to bring up slavery, when we go through history, there you have to look at it. Who were the protesters, or they like to call them the agitators? They were young people, they were the youth. And I always refer back to the Soweto uprising in South Africa. I believe it was June 16th, 1975, where the students decided we're going to walk out of the classrooms and protest and march down the street. And the government told them don't do it, and they sent the police guards, or what we would call National Guards, and they said if you protest, we're going to shoot you down. And they shot them down, kids. So, going back here in the United States in the 50s, in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, the Martin Luther King and those leaders, they would tell young kids, I think it was a march, I don't know, it was in Atlanta, one of them southern cities, they had the young kids marching down the street. And they wanted the cameras there, because what are you going to do? Are you going to sick your dog on these kids? Are you going to put the water hose on the kids? Well, the whole world is going to see, right? So let's go back in history and look at, who are these quote unquote civil disobedient agitators? There were the youth, and that's very important. And for a very long time here in America, we kind of lost that. So I'm glad to see that. Um, Again, guys, we're waiting for the judge. I told him, let's go. I sent him the link. He has very slow Wi-Fi. His phone was cloned. We talked about this on the show yesterday. Thank you to everybody that has supported my YouTube channel, The Real Dana. We hit 100K. That is a major milestone. And I'm proud of myself. Like, sometimes we have to give our own selves a pat on the back. So it takes him a minute. And I just text him. So if anybody else want to request to come up just to talk to the topics, you could do so. Do you want to say anything, Man Cave? Because listen,
I've said I've said my piece. I want to hear other people's
but the judge.
perspectives
Okay.
as well. So I'm here to, I'm not a know-it-all or have an argument or anything, but man.
No, I get it, honey, because listen, I never lived in New York because it's just too much. It's too expensive. However, I think I would feel inconvenienced too.
That's what it really is. So
That's what
whatever.
processor you think you feel.
Yeah. But also, Columbia is funded by Israelis. So they can also transfer to another school. What better way to protest than to take money out of their pockets?
I've said that as well, because that's $90,000 a year. And so, Columbia said, okay, all classrooms going online. All right, well, and then those students are saying, well, you have to give us a partial refund because we ain't paying for school and room and board. Are you going to give them a refund of what, damn near $50,000-$60,000? Yeah, them schools are expensive. And I think that is a great idea to take your money out of the schools and go elsewhere. I'm about to text the judge
I
again.
think that's the third best school or second best school in the country. So anywhere you go, that's kind of being a step down from where you're at.
Right.
Yo, Pat, if I can ask you though, what do you think is funding? You said somebody's funding these protests. Who do you think is funding them?
You asking me, brother?
Yep, because I've heard people say that, and they haven't said who's funding.
I can't say who I think, but I've seen this protest. I saw the protests. Was it the George Floyd stuff? Like, man, it takes money to get pallets of bricks and things like that to throw at whoever you're protesting at. Like, that stuff costs money.
Well, that's intelligence agencies. I agree with you 100% there. All of the unrest, there were people legitimately protesting. I support all protests, but a lot of that was ginned up by the FBI and other operatives.
So I don't know
and
if this is something like that. That's all I'm saying. I don't know. So I'm just here to learn and talk with everybody else. That's it.
Somebody put in the message 4 dead in Ohio. That's not today, because I just Googled it, and that goes, they pulled Kent Kent State came up. So what do you mean 4 dead in Ohio? And guys, can you please retweet this space? We're just waiting for the judge to come. Hi, Kanye.
Hey, how you doing, Dana? So glad to catch this space. How you been?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I got a summer cold, so that sucks.
Oh yeah.
The worst.
So you're Gen Z, right?
No, I'm a millennial, 92.
Oh, okay. So you are 32.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So what are your thoughts?
On this Kent State thing,
Well, the student protests.
I think it's performative. Um, and I think okay. So there's two ways, right? So all protests in some ways are performative. However, I think this is just a reflection of what college has become. It's basically a liberal breeding ground. So people have victims, they have their chosen victims and their chosen aggressors. So when people start to overly empathize with a certain group, they see no wrong in what that group does and then everything wrong in what the other group is doing. Now, so much so that they feel they have to choose a side in that. And I think, and this is a reflection of American foreign policy, we should kind of stay out of certain things that don't have anything to do with us. But when you see that the United States government is giving tens of billions of dollars to one group that is actively killing um, or committing genocide, depending on how they look at it, to another group, it gets to the point where it's like, okay, I don't agree with it, but they're doing what they've been taught to do, and that's protest. So it's like they're creating their own problems, they're encouraging it, but then they're punishing the people for the problems that they're creating. You know what I mean? Because they go to college, because trust me, in school, all they did was tell you, oh, you got to fight the system in peaceful protests and blah blah blah, and they throw Martin Luther King in your face. And so this is just a more how can I put this, more extreme version of a sit-in without the violence, because back then when they were sitting in, they were getting hit across the head. Now they're coming in water hoses and arresting people with mace. So it's just like they're creating their own problems. That's my opinion. My take on the situation. I know it's a little long-winded.
They're getting the smoke bombs and stuff started happening about 4 p.m. today. And
Well, that's
mind you,
because of
Columbia
who.
Columbia is in a predominantly Jewish
I
neighborhood.
was about to say that too, and that's because who they're protesting against is the reason why they're
Yeah,
getting
yeah, yeah. They're
hit
not
so
going to
hard.
win that. They're not going to win that.
Most of the money they have is tied up in foreign interests that the United States government keeps supporting, if you catch my drift.
Can I speak, Dana?
Yeah, it's an open floor. I just spoke to the judge. He's trying to get on. So go ahead.
Okay, I'm the one that put the 4 dead in Ohio. From a totally different generation from you all.
Oh, okay, so you
But
was referencing back then.
I was referencing to what you were saying, how the college students kind of move, the needle. And those students at Ohio State University, I believe this was back in the 60s, were protesting the Vietnam War. And they shot and killed them. And the Isaac brothers made a song, 4 dead in Ohio. So that's the reason why I posted that. It has nothing to do with something that happened today, but it's very similar in terms of what's on campuses. Because I believe the young people do move, they move the needle a lot in terms of things that are happening in society.
Right. And to that point with Kent State, see, not just this administration, but this government know good and goddamn well they do not want another Kent State incident, because that looks bad on state and federal government. Um, I did see some students being roughed up or whatever, but I don't think, and maybe you guys could give your opinions on this, but I don't think we will see that type of aggressive behavior towards protesters on college campuses like Kent State again. Or maybe you guys think otherwise. I don't know. Somebody answer that.
Yeah, I think otherwise. And that's because who they protesting against. There's a reason why I think otherwise, because at the end of the day, like, they pretty much demonize. Man, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. Like, they're demonizing um people who just object war, right? Because there's always been pacifists in this country who just don't like conflict at all. But when you demonize it to say they're supporting a terrorist group, Well, that's the whole thing. Now, granted, there may be some people who actually are supporting the terrorist group, but I think when you start to paint everybody with that broad brush, then it makes it, less, people less sympathetic to when something happens to that group of people. So I don't know. I think they'll do it. I think it's a bad thing, but I think they'll try their best to cover it up. But it's kind of hard to because everybody has a cell phone these days, and everybody's uploading what they think happened. So, it's kind of hard. It's really interesting to see it play out, though. But thank you for having me, Dana.
Yeah, I mean, so you guys, I don't know if you got to speak kind of like I see the judge. Judge, I sent you a co-host request. So he's up here. So when he comes up, we're really going to speak to the question: was or slash is slavery a necessary evil? Just to give context to it, because we're going to reference slavery here in the United States, but the history of slavery as well. And then, of course, the protest that's going on. If people want to speak to illegal migrants, because it's something I want to bring up with that. And then, if somebody want to bring up what's going on with Trump and his cases, or just talk about the question was, is slavery a necessary evil? So, hi, Judge. I know it takes you a minute.
Hi there.
So
Hi
we was
there.
having a good conversation. Yeah. People, warming up the stage, and they want to hear your remarks, particularly Man Cave, because he lives in the Bronx, right next to Columbia, right?
Manhattan.
And you live in Manhattan, or you live
Yeah,
Columbia?
Manhattan. Columbia's in Manhattan, up here in
Columbia's
Uptown.
in the Bronx.
No, right here. I'm here.
What street, honey?
Like 110th or 13th, and it runs from it's here in Manhattan. Fordham is in the Bronx.
Oh, wait a minute. What's it? It's something of Columbia in the Bronx. Oh, I'm thinking of the Auburn Ballroom. Columbia bought that.
No, the campus where everything's
The
going on
campus,
is
yes,
right
yes,
here.
yes.
Yeah, it's right here,
But
right
it's
up the street.
uptown.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's Morningside
Okay.
Heights.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do I get that? I don't know. I don't know why I got the Bronx for some reason. Sorry about that. But yeah, so he's there in Manhattan. And but he wanted your take on, and we spoke about this on the show yesterday, but he wanted your take on what do you think of the student protests in Columbia and nationwide, and then we could get to the topic.
It's always, to me, it's always good when students get engaged to the point of dealing with civil disobedience. That's a good thing. It shows an activism that can carry over into later life to good effect. What I am intrigued about is the subject of the unrest. It's not racism, it's not internal economics, it's Palestine, it's Gaza, it's Israel versus the Palestinian people. So there are some interesting things that can come out of this that I'm a little nervous about. One of them is the so-called Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. It's got good intentions, but I think there's some very frightful possibilities of what can come out of it. It makes the use of language essentially criminal. Now, certain language, certain sayings could be punishable by law. One of them in particular that Black people ought to be aware of is, for example, claiming Israel is a racist state. Now, I mean, aside from Hasidic Jews and those who come from Ethiopia and the classic racist based treatment they sometimes receive, that would be against federal law, subject to criminal punishment. To talk about that or discuss that, making remarks that are dehumanizing, making stereotypical allegations about people of the Jewish faith would become criminally liable matters. Now, to accuse someone who's Jewish of being more loyal to Israel than he is to the United States would also become a matter of criminal sanction. These kind of things are bad. The other one, drawing a comparison of Israeli policy as it's carried out against the Palestinians with the Nazis, would be subject to criminal sanction. There are some specifics and generalities in here that are not very pleasant to contemplate in terms of what that does to the First Amendment, because the United States over and over and over again says that what you must do to one group, you must do to the other. No one group can get a benefit over the other. That's how they knocked affirmative action as it got more recently construed down. The way Justice Roberts wrote his opinion, by the way, is not downing affirmative action per se, because that's exactly how most of the black students in America were formulating affirmative action back in the late mid-60s, and not the way that most black students and others think affirmative action should be stated on the basis of race. But there's some bad things in this act, even though I assume the intention is well. For example, to claim that the Jewish people do not have the right to the Palestinian area, and that the Palestinian residents for the last couple of hundred years have a greater claim, would also be actionable under this act as subject to a criminal penalty. Are holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the Israeli government would be criminally actionable. I don't find that kind of speech to be subject to that kind of thing. It's never been in the country's history. And the only time we have had restrictions that come even close is when we've had either an overt war going on, and only certain kinds of war, that is declared war, and for an anomalous period of about a decade that took place in the 50s and extended into the early 60s when it came to communism. I remember the first time I made an application for a part-time job when I was in the 11th grade. And in those days, you had to get a student work permit from the principal's office at your high school. They had a page and a half on just about every work application. Do you now or have you ever belong to any of the following communist organizations or any other unnamed organization that you knew to be overtly or covertly communist in nature? And they listed page and a half in fine print of agencies, organizations, and entities that you had to specifically deny having advanced the interest of, attended the meetings of, or covertly or overtly supporting. Now, if you secretly supported them, you would have been basically a fool to have come right out and said, "Oh yeah, I like them." And by the way, that's what they did to Angela Davis. Ronald Reagan did that when he was governor of California. The Times got him about his assertions that the University of California was infiltrated by communist professors. And the Times said, find one. And he couldn't until he came up with Angela Davis. And they said, you've lost your mind. He said, no. When she was 18 and a freshman in college, she once belonged to the Che Lumumba Club. So they laughed at him, and then they went through some stuff that you can read about in the Glass House Tapes, Part 2 by Louis Tackwood, if you can find a copy.
So what are we talking about here?
So what
Communism
I'm
or the
talking
protests?
about is the First Amendment situation that has become so much under assault in issues that do not deal with on a collegiate level of what you would expect them to have been about a year ago: racism, police brutality, the economy, the ridiculously high price it takes to get an education these days, the ridiculously low job prospects that college graduates face, the abysmal state of education. That's not what the subject of radicalism is about. It's manifesting in a question of Palestine. And that's a very fascinating thing from a political science perspective, that the activism that is sweeping the college campuses is not something like anti-war or anti-discrimination and anti-segregation like it has been throughout the country's history. It's over a question of the dynamics of who do you support in the Palestinian situation. That's kind of surprising. So I pass the mic on with that observation.
All right, so that was to Man Cave and anybody else with the protest. But real quick, speak to the topic, and then I'm gonna go to
You mean the
Hans.
slavery thing?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I put is. I said was/is slavery a necessary evil, because slavery is still going on today
yeah,
throughout
it
this
does
world.
in a form. See, the most insidious result of or affect of slavery is the installation of a slave's attitude in the subject. That's the most debilitating. So I would have suspected that that would have been the hot topic, not Palestine. But aside from that, this is a thing that's political science theory. It's got to do with concentration of resources and or capacity to organize the available resources for the improvement of, you can put it, civilization, because this is where it came up. Ordinarily in political science, you have this old truism: in order for a society to advance, it must have a centralized control of its resources such that the resources can be effectively manipulated for positive results relative to the society. What always happens is that once the wealth becomes concentrated, it can be utilized to advance the aims of the political entity or the nation or the civilization or the culture in question. But at some point, after the population of that entity increases to a certain point, that concentration of wealth becomes dysfunctional, and there's not enough to go around on a level to meet the expectations of the people that are impacted. That society weakens, it crumbles, and typically some barbarians sweep in from the frontier and take over. You can see what happens with the Germanic invasions that toppled Western Rome. But today we don't have any barbarians on the frontier. We've got a much more tightly compacted situation where civilization is spread around the world with instant communications and very swift flight and transport situations thanks to jet planes. There is this thing when we get to slavery of the effort to concentrate the, shall we say, intellectual resources of a society. This is the theory behind it. It's not approval one way or the other, just a theory. And you want to be able to concentrate the utilities that attend upon intellectual developments, the mind of a society, so they can think, figure stuff out, and do advances free from the need to do onerous labor. See, right now we go and press the microwave and put in 33 seconds, or we go and switch the thermostat on and we dial what we want and everything works the right way. Our computers turn our lights on. Hey Siri, so and so. And it works out. So we have labor saving devices so we can put our minds to the task of developing stuff that requires intellect. We don't do that so much these days. We like to gossip and we like to misuse the potential of the internet into something just salacious and generally useless. But in the past, what happened is you had slavery so that some could do the onerous labor and others could do the thinking and the engineering, the math, the science, and the technology, such as irrigation and mass farming and organizing large groups of people into coherent units and functional entities. But at some point, what it took to maintain an institution of slavery became more onerous to the society than the benefits of slavery. Now, it happens that every single entity that has ever exercised power on the planet has at one time been subject to enslavement. For example, Zeke Heil or Heil Hitler or that kind of nonsense we associate with Nazism and the German state in the 1930s, most drastically in the early 1940s. And that German state that we think of with the goose stepping Nazis in sharp uniforms and MP-38 submachine guns, M98 Mauser rifles, 88 millimeter cannon, Bismarck battleship, and the Messerschmitt, and all of this science and technology had when it was formed in the 1870s, just 25 years before the mess started getting really funky. 50 years, let's say, before we got the Nazis coming to power. That was based on the principle of the Prussian Junker, Junker, the Prussian nobility. So your typical German Wehrmacht officer was a Prussian officer, and the Prussians were actively sought out as slaves in medieval Europe. They were also subject to various and sundry crusades, which weren't as far away as the Middle East, because the Prussians were known as pagans and they had crusade declared against them. So they were enslaved, but yet they turned around to perceive themselves as the master race with the duty to enslave, as they put it, the Untermenschen, the inferior subhumans. So we see this turned around. Now, it develops that in the United States of America, the institution of slavery, which was applied to white people, and an attempt was made to apply it to Indians, Native Americans, which did not work because the Native American was quite willing to die rather than serve as a slave. And white people, such as Irish, who were brought over in conditions of indentured servitude, or as literal slaves, because English law at the time allowed enslavement for debt in debtor's prison. We have a situation where those white people could run away into the woods and blend in with another white community and nobody would know any better, and they were unruly to an extent. Whereas you had these nice Africans who got brought over from Africa into a place that was familiar but unfamiliar to them, and they were a bit more docile and they stood out and made ideal slaves. And our problem today is that one of the classic methods of slavery was to put the elements of the slave into the culture of the slave so he would teach enslavement to himself. There was a Willie Lynch. I did study some of his writings, and the earliest I came upon was somewhere circa 1706. There were some pamphlets, and what they talked about was you have to treat Negroes like horses. You cannot not enslave, you cannot domesticate a wild herd lead stallion, but you can enslave the lead herd mare. And if you domesticate the lead herd mare, she will help you domesticate all the rest of the horses and domesticate her own offspring. All you could use a herd stallion for was for breeding purposes, and that was said to be what you could use the leadership caste of the Negro for, is breeding only, because you could not enslave them. They simply would not go along with it. So we have the elements of slave culture put into the black race in the United States, and we still show exemplars of it. One of the most common is our use of the N word for self. And that's part of the process of enslavement. That is to get the target of your propaganda that you're using to keep the target a slave to be reflected in his culture. So we say we use the N word for being friendly, but your subconscious knows what the N word means. And when you use it in reference to yourself or to your friends and associates and your homies, then you are saying to yourself that you are fit to be a slave. There's no way around it. And even that's even if your subconscious won't tell your conscious mind what it's up to when it uses this negative against yourself. That's one of the problems with slavery. So right now, obviously, we've grown out of the need for slaves. Slavery is something that is no longer functional to the society and causes great dysfunction in terms of its collateral damage to everyone involved in the society, but we don't recognize it for what it is. And we keep perpetrating it even when we think we are trying to do something about it. So it has its insidious consequences and it is obsolete. So Russia, by the way, when it imposed communism back in the early 20th century, more than 100 years ago, at least in terms of a translated treatise that I read from Lenin, said that Russia will not be capable of becoming a democratic nation until there are no significant numbers of Russians left alive with a living memory of their enslavement under the czars. We must turn them from religion and all other things so they become self dependent. They become satisfied and familiar with their ability to manage their own affairs, form and maintain a viable and dangerous military, and to develop the personal attributes and orientations of a free people. Therefore, we should set up a dictatorship of the proletariat sufficient to force them into those channels necessary to the process of making their minds become free. Now, this 1917 treatise that I read, written by Lenin said in the last decade of this century, meaning the 20th century, somewhere around about 1990, we will be able to enter into a period of glasnost and perestroika, where the Russian people can set up a free democracy, no longer needing the assistance of communism to overcome their enslaved recent past. So that is something I damn near memorized because I read it often enough. And that's what we've got right now. They were saying Ronald Reagan is responsible for the Soviets developing glasnost and perestroika, and he has destroyed communism. No, he didn't. That was their plan. It was only something out there to be used to get people to think like free people rather than slaves under the czars. Now, we have a leftover in terms of the English part of the culture that we have to put up with on a daily basis called the serf. The peasant was a poor landless person, but he did not belong to the land. A serf was a slave who belonged to the land. If you bought or were given on a strip of land to manage for the king, you owned the serfs. And to get free from serfdom, what happened was if you went and escaped, you checked in with a monastery, a church, a convent, or something, and the Catholic officials recorded your name and the date. And if you managed to come back 1 year and 1 day later, still in a condition of being free, they would give you a certificate, so to speak, that you were now a free person. And under church law, which was not to be denied, you could not be restored to your serf status. You were now a peasant. And if you acquired property and some rights to some land, a farm holding, then you became a yeoman, an ordinary commoner. So these plantation things that we got were set up by the English barons, Sir Walter Raleigh, Sir Walter Scott, favorites of Queen Elizabeth in Elizabethan times in 16th century England to exploit the Irish population. And that became the basis for what ultimately became the Southern plantation. And the circumstances of the Irish serf became those of the African slave in America in the same exact time period. So we've got all sorts of things that would show that yes, there might be a historic place for it in terms of history, not going through the rights or wrongs, just showing what happened and the whys and wherefores. So there is an argument could be said slavery has exceeded its utility, which it did possess to a certain extent at one point in time. I'm not giving you anybody's opinion. I'm just giving you a political science analysis that is independent of the morality of the situation. So with that, that's the lesson for
Um,
the evening.
okay. I just want to say one thing, and then I'm gonna go to the hands. I'm gonna go to you, Cadillac, and Professor. I know you came up, and then it was the Negro. So if you wanted to speak, raise your hand so I'll know. But let me input this because slavery still exists today, particularly in the Congo, where you have, damn near millions of um I don't know how you say it, Congolans. I know that's not what you call them, but
Congolese.
people of the
The
Congo,
word is
Congolese,
Congolese.
Congolese, yes, Congolese people who are working the mines and getting paid to little to nothing, and you even have children, and I will consider that a form of modern day slavery because these are the people that are digging for the minerals or um, substance to make our computers, our cell phones, and all types of stuff. So, yeah, I just want to implement that. So, I don't know. You want to comment on that quickly, Judge? And then I want to go to Cadillac.
Slavery is still alive and well. And we often don't recognize what it is. Like, for example, Kwanzaa is Swahili. Swahili was developed in the late 18th century on through the 19th century as a pidgin language combining Bantu, English, Dutch, and Arabic into a language that could be used to conduct the slave and ivory trade on the eastern coast of Africa that went into the second decade of the 20th century. So it's still alive and well.
Okay. All right, go ahead,
One
Kyle.
other thing, too, you should be aware of this. When it comes to things that we have concealed from us in this country, if you were elsewhere in the world, you would be hearing countless news articles that one of the reasons the Russians are in Ukraine is to end sex trafficking and sex slavery that is rampant in Ukraine. They have what they call sex castles, which were formerly hotels that are now armed centers where there are women being held against their will as sex slaves and trafficked in and out of that. For the most part, they are descendants of Africans that Premier Stalin brought over in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And because Ukraine was the southernmost state in the Soviet Union, they settled there to get away from the 40 and 50 below zero temperatures outside of Moscow in the winter, because the Ukraine is right there on the Black Sea. So we do have that problem. So we do have modern indicia of slavery that is served by the U.S. government, and they're furnishing aid to Ukraine. More recently, next after that, we have the tea trade. I won't drink tea because of what it stands for. Up until 1950, the United States government had an agreement with Chiang Kai-shek, who populated Taiwan with the nationalist Chinese, and they had an agreement with the United States, Great Britain, and France to allow the continuous trade in tea and opium. If the United States, England, and France brought opium over there, they would still be permitted to trade it for tea. There was a triangular trade wherein one of the last effective emperors back in the late 18th century, got King George III, the monarch that was on the throne when the United States staged its successful revolution, that said you had to purchase tea with gold bullion. So since England was growing broke and America was already just a broke frontier place, and it still had its passion for tea, witness the Boston Tea Party mess, what went on is the English and the French were growing opium in what is now Afghanistan, and they were taking it to China, trading it for gold bullion, and handing the gold bullion over for tea. When you look at a bottle of Cutty Sark whiskey, or you talk about the Flying Cloud clipper ship, these famous fast sailing ships were to quickly get the opium from Afghanistan to China and the tea from China back to England or the United States or France. So the tea trade was essentially built on deliberately addicting millions of Chinese to opium, conducting opium dens or running opium dens to supply the addiction, get the gold and accumulate the gold and buy tea with it. So the United States was in agreement with Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist Chinese up until 1950, when Mao threw them out, to be able to continue this trade in opium for tea. And the reason Afghanistan is such a hellhole now is because for 200 years prior to that, the United States, France, Great Britain, then Japan and Germany propped up one drug lord after another to take control to facilitate the acquisition of opium. And they tear them down as soon as they got too big and prop somebody else up. So there's a continued history of internecine warfare in Afghanistan. It used to be known as Northern India when it was a British colony. So we have that tradition based on an enslavement of the mind and body. And also, it bespeaks the filthy involvement in a trade that has no justification, that is opium for tea. And the same government that talks about freedom, the same government that went through the Civil War, turns right around and imposes a new form of Pan-African enslavement, this time of young females, by someone that we're sending billions of dollars in aid and support over to. That is Ukraine. And that is the filthy truth that the rest of the world is aware of, that we hide from our citizens. So I'll pass the mic on that.
All right, go ahead, Cadillac.
All right, thanks for letting me speak, Dana. Shout out to the judge, shout out to the family in the space. I'm gonna answer the question. Was slavery necessary evil? I'm gonna say it depends on what side of the street you stand on, or what side of the perspective that you stand on. Meaning that slavery was bad for Black people, right? All across the globe, or whoever got conquered up under that, or whatever you want to call it. But for white people, it was good. They don't see nothing wrong with the shit they did. They don't see nothing wrong with the whole process. They feel like it made America great, and it did this and it did that, but they don't want to pay the slaves. They still don't want to pay the descendants of the slaves. So I don't know. I think it's a twisted mindset that they got, and but if you ask me, I'm against slavery. You know what I'm saying? In any form, shape, or fashion. And does it exist today? Yeah, I think it still exists today. The judge said in a limited capacity or whatever. I forgot the exact word that he used, but I'm gonna say it exists in a major capacity, because nobody chooses to get up and go to work every morning. We are forced.
I can't hear anything. I'm going to come right back.
We are forced to get up and go to work every single morning. That's forced labor. That's slavery. God put all of the food, the fruits, the minerals, everything on this planet, and He didn't charge nobody for that. White folks did that. You know what I mean? People who the kings and the rulers or whatever, they the ones who enslaving their own people. I feel like all of us are enslaved to this system, to capitalism for sure in the United States of America. Because hey, the water is free, the air is free, everything is free, right? God created this. He didn't. Nobody is to be the ruler over this stuff. According to, I don't know, I guess whatever religion you might want to believe in, but these people here actually came through and colonized and conquered and put it up under their own jurisdiction. And yeah, so now they charging everybody for it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think slavery still is alive and well. They freed the Black slaves and they enslaved everybody else, white folks, Asians, Arabs, everybody in some form of slavery. We just got a caste system that a lot of us don't believe in, that we can't see, but yeah, the Arabs are over us over here in America. The Chinese, the Asians are over us. For all of them, the Mexicans, whoever, the Hispanics, wherever you come from, they are over Black people. You know what I'm saying? Because we're in a caste system. I land right there. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks. Judge, can you mute up?
What are you hearing?
Okay, I don't see. No, I'm just saying, if you're not talking, just mute.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
Work this. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can get back.
Professor dropped down, so I'm gonna go to the Negro, and then Immortal, and then Gordon.
Hey, how's it going, Dana? How's it going, Judge? Good afternoon or good evening, where you guys are at. Trump protesting illegals is slavery a necessary evil. I'm going to tie in all three of them. I'm going to tie in just the protesting and illegal, and I'm going to just use Yale as a case study. For those that might not be aware, I go to University of New Haven, which is about like 15 to 10 minutes away from Yale, New Haven. So one day when I was up at school, I decided to make a quick break to Yale, New Haven to see what was going on, see what the protesting was all about and what were they doing, what was their demands and so forth and so forth. I was just being a little nosy Negro. So I went up and talked to some of the, one thing I noticed when I was just walking around the green on Yale was that most of the students were not from America. They were not from the United States. It seemed like a lot of them need H-1B1 visas and whatnot to get their behinds over here. So that was the first thing I noticed. Hardly no Negro, no Black American people. That was the other thing I saw. And if they were kind of, I would say, cosplayed by African people, you know, from them doing steps and them acting like the Divine Nine or whatever you want to call it these days. They were just cosplaying Black American people all the way around, which I feel like put Black American people in an awkward position because I feel like this was a politically charged rally in the interest of a country that may or may not be allied to the United States, you know. That's just the reality. The students that were there were supposed to be getting an education. They're not there to be pushing their political agendas, especially if they're not American citizens. I look at that they're using these institutions to leverage a political agenda that could be adversarial to the American Negro. And that was kind of my concerns based off what I was seeing. It should be talks about lineage-based reparations on that campus. It should be talking about American politics specifically when it comes to our community. And I don't see that being exercised, but I see that situation exercised. One of the things they talk about on the news, they say that this is a wedge issue. When you hear that term wedge, meaning that this is a fringe issue, this is a pet issue, this is not a main concern or something that actually is going to be, that's going to could, like, it's not really a pressing issue to the average American person. And they're trying to pressure this issue to make it a fringe, make it a main issue, which I find is problematic. Or we have a lot of financial issues that are going on when it comes to the prices of gas and whatnot. But to tie in the slavery part, it's ironic how Yale was running at the same time that they have the protests, they downplay Negro American chattel slavery when they run seminars called Slavery Through Antiquity, saying that slavery throughout the ages undermines American chattel slavery here on this soil. All right. So I find it very problematic that Yale would allow this type of propaganda on their campuses, but won't tell the truth when it comes to Negro American people and capitalize off of their artifacts, their history, and whatnot. It's kind of disgusting. So yeah, that's just my take of just using Yale as a specific case study, and just like a student just walking past the campus green and just seeing what I'm seeing. It should be more of us Black American people up there, not these whatever people where they're from, capitalizing off the American dream.
Thank you for that. I want to go to Immortal. Immortal, Gordon, then Ricky.
Thank you very much. Greetings to you, Dana, and the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. It's always an honor and a pleasure to speak on your spaces. So I think I'll do what the last speaker did, kind of speak on the Trump thing, and then is slavery a necessary evil? Around St. Louis, Washington University, there's a lot of activity where they having protests recently, and Washington University sicked the dogs on them. They started setting up tents, and they sent the police out and started smacking them around a little bit. They didn't do them like they do us, but they smacked them around a little bit. As a matter of fact, the head of the Board of Aldermen of St. Louis City was involved in that. She was, I believe, was arrested, along with people of note from other parts of the country. So y'all might want to check that out, how that went down for the protest at Washington University. hopefully some of the people who got caught up, some of the local people who got caught up in that will have done themselves a disservice so much till they won't be around to take a look at the reparations recommendations that'll be coming in September. Hopefully that head of that St. Louis Alderman won't be there. Anyway, uh, was or is slavery a necessary evil? I say no. Slavery is never necessary. The only time slavery is necessary is if you're a completely narcissist. You got a narcissist in leadership. They don't know how to create a society. So they're going to get people and force them to do things that they want to do in order to attempt to create a society. They don't know how to, build a society. So they need somebody else to build it for them. They don't know how to motivate people. So they have to force people to do what they want them to do. You can just almost, just like they got a lot of y'all vaccinated, it's ways, they didn't put no guns to y'all head, but they made it difficult. So any leader should be able to, especially if they're the head of a government, should be able to push the people around to do what they want them to do without enslaving them. I think that's 100% narcissist. So if you're lazy, good for nothing narcissist who should never be in a power position, but you are against all odds or against the better you are, then slavery might be an option for unnecessary for you because you don't know what else to do. But an enlightened leader doesn't have to use slavery at all. They'll just, use society and things of that nature. And then one thing about slavery too, I haven't seen a slavery in any history record that was like ours. Everybody's slavery wasn't the same. Even we go back to all these different things, all these different places in ancient history and even in modern history. No, it wasn't chattel slavery. But anyway, that's another thing. But now I ask myself sometimes, am I outside of slavery? I say it's not a necessary evil, but they're doing it. Now I ask, am I outside of slavery? Like Cadillac said. And I look at it like this, I'm gonna land it with this. I go to work every day. When I go to my employer, I sat down with them to get this job and they said, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars and you're going to perform these performances. And we agreed that the money that I was receiving, was equal to what I was going to be providing, the service I was going to, or what I was going to be doing for them. So I'm not making any money. I'm taking my time, my expertise, my labor, and I'm trading it for even trade with a company who's willing to pay me to do that. I haven't made any money. So as long as a government can tax me, my labor, who does it belong to? Does it belong to me? Because they used to rent out slaves in Nashville. Every slave didn't live on a plantation. If you lived in Nashville during slavery, you most likely had your own spot that you rented. You had your own food and all this that you had to take care of, your food, your lodging. You had to take care of all that. But when master send for you and tell you, come over here, Mr. Charlie got a fence he won't put up over there. He gonna put a fence all around the church and around his house. And nigga, you're gonna go over there and put that fence up. Now we want it done within this certain amount of time, and so on and so forth. When the job is done, Mr. Charlie paid, the master, and the master took some of kept some for himself and gave the slave just enough to get to the next job. So he didn't stand over him all day and tell him where to live, just live close enough where I can send for you. Let me know where you're gonna be at, type stuff. It was a little different. So now I feel like that's kind of the slave that I'm under. Like I work all day and you get some before I see it. So even though I'm not making any money, I could see if I went and produced something and it cost me $5 to produce, but I sold it to y'all for $10. Now I'm making profits. Now I'm in business as a company, hopefully a corporation or something. Now I can see where I would be taxed. But as a person laboring, nah, if you working, that's what you are. You a slave. They take your money before you get it, And if you don't pay them or if you don't file, then they got places, they gonna treat you like a slave then too. So yeah, hopefully that made sense. I appreciate y'all letting me speak.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I want to go to Gordon, then Professor, then Art. Is Gordon? Yeah. Go ahead, Gordon. Gordon, going once, going twice, going three times. All right. Is Professor? Yeah. Go ahead, Professor.
Good evening, Judge. What's going on, Fred? I had a quick question. I wanted to interject something since we were talking about slavery. I wanted to remind that the American chattel slave uh, system is different from anything that's ever occurred in the world, and I want to remind or inform the room that early on, when America tried to be egalitarian, there's a really good book that talks about this called by Lerone Bennett called "The Shaping of America," which mysteriously is disappearing in libraries all across the country. But when America tried to become egalitarian, there were forces to make sure that Europeans became the ruling class. So, for instance, according to Howard Zinn's "The People History of the United States," um, uh, Virginia's ruling class, having proclaimed that all white men were superior to blacks, went on to offer their social inferiors a number of their social but white inferiors a number of benefits previously denied to them. And a 1705 law passed requiring masters to provide white servants whose indentured time was up with 10 bushels of corn, 30 shillings, and a gun. I'm going to stop right there because it, I teach history. And in my world, scholars want to pretend like the first time that Europeans received a quote unquote welfare system was during the New Deal. But I just want to say in 1705, Virginia passed a law that required white servants to be reimbursed monetarily, while black indentured servants didn't receive the same courtesy. Last but not least, Maryland was responsible in the late 1600s, when America was trying. We had flickers of egalitarianism. Maryland passed an edict that literally doomed um, foundational Black Americans to slavery. But yeah, it's a good discussion. That's all I have.
Thank you. Art.
Yeah. Um. Uh, is slavery a necessary evil? I think that if you're talking about chattel slavery, I guess that matters if you're the person who descendants or of slaves or slave masters, because you get two different variants if you ask these two different groups. I would argue that government's been slavery since the beginning. The Constitution is just a slave contract. That's, you know, they lie to tell you that they give you rights, but the whole point of the government is to strip your rights. Literally, that's its whole purpose. That's what it does. So, and eventually, over time, you'll be a slave. Hence, the 13th Amendment exception clause makes you a slave. So, and in crime bills, right? And then the same rich people get bailouts, but you don't. So, what is that? Remind everybody the opposite of liberty is necessity. A lot of people don't really digest or really clock what that means. That means the opposite of your freedom is necessity. Whatever you is a necessity, you're a slave to. And on top of having food, some could argue having kids, all these things are necessity. People wanted to add religion and government on top of all that. Um, I don't see the point, but to me, that's slavery. That's about as good as slavery as you're gonna get, because you get robbed every time. And I would say it's a more dangerous slavery, because when you see like chattel slavery, you know what it is. When you see this governmental slavery, good luck trying to convince people of slavery. Like, you know what I mean? It's like trying to get off the plantation. And so I don't know. That's my take on it. So I would say in one way it's a necessity, a necessary evil, or necessity being the opposite of liberty, in the form of government, because nobody can justify government. There's no rationale for a monopoly on violence and not expecting monopolies and violence. So if you expect that from the government, what do you really, what did you need it for? Because seems like everybody complains about monopolies and violence, but that's what you're going to get from the government. Who you think makes all these monopolies? Who made Amazon? I'll remind you, Elon Musk, the dude that owns this app, was worth single-digit billions before COVID. Now he's worth triple-digit billions. Government. So, just food for thought. I landed.
Well, let me implement this, right? So I took this question from somebody else, and I don't know if you're listening, Judge, because I see you're tweeting, but I took this question from someone else on YouTube, and he asked, the question was slavery a necessary evil? So that's where I got it from. And then I added, is slavery a necessary evil because of due to present day? And like I said, yes, there is present day slavery going on. And I want to go back to the Congo, and just going to your point, Art, necessity, right, versus liberty, because it's a necessity for us to have these cell phones, to have these computers, to have all these electronics, because we don't want to give it up. But we need to remind ourselves, when we utilize these things, that we are part of the monopoly. We create and participate in modern day slavery to continue, because who are the people that are digging up the minerals or uranium or whatever to make these products that we buy? So it's like a wheel cycle that's going around. Cotton was king when we talk about slavery in the United States from the 1600s to the 1800s. Excuse me. Cotton, rice, these are all commodities, but monopoly that was monopolized to build empires. Tea, the judge referenced the tea. So I have to agree with what you're saying, Art. But we also have to remind ourselves that we participate in the hand of slavery today. So to me, this question is you when you read it, it's a simple question, but it's very loaded, and it requires critical thinking, because we do have to admit that we play a hand in slavery that is taking place today, just like regular people played a hand when slavery was taking place in the 19th century, on this land, and earlier, and throughout Europe, going back to the times of Christ. A while ago, the judge brought this to my attention. When we look at the cross that people like to wear who are religious, the cross to them symbolizes the cross that Jesus died on. But what it actually symbolizes is the crucifixion of how they punished their slaves during the Roman times. So the cross was in existence before Jesus Christ, because that was a method of punishing and crucifying slaves who tried to do uprisings or be disobedient or whatever. So again, but then now when we look at the cross today, it's worship as something holy. So I just think we need to kind of sometimes, step back and look at the whole picture. And I know the judge, when he first came up here talking about slavery, he took us all the way back into history, brought us back to the present, went back into history, because you have to look at it from a political science way of thinking. Did you want to say anything, Judge, or are you still reposting? Or are you
I'm
even listening?
listening, and yes, I'm multitasking. I'm doing what I did.
Because I think your focus more so on the Elon Musk.
I'm doing what I did when I had to go look at something somebody was filed, listen to a witness, listen to my clerk, and try to figure out what the rules of evidence were on some case. Yeah,
Well, okay, so let
all
me
of
just
this.
say this.
I'm,
I guess you appreciate what everybody else came up here and had to
I'm
say. I
just,
mean, they did say some profound things because usually you get off your mic to comment, but you
I,
must agree or appreciate.
let me just say this. As I put in my initial premises tonight, slavery is most often a condition of the mind. And the elucidation or the illustration of that point tonight is bearing out that political science premises. So I'm not faulting anybody. It's just a way of looking at things. You have to understand, here is a statistic that I have been thinking about. Okay, slavery. What does it mean for everybody involved? Let's supposing you are not a slave, but you are dying because of slavery. Whether you were a Roman legionnaire who was a citizen of Republic Rome, dying to deal with, one of the frequent Roman slave uprisings, let's say Spartacus, okay? Whether you are a Johnny Reb at Gettysburg, we've heard of Gettysburg 7 years ago, etc., Lincoln giving his famous Gettysburg Address. Well, this was a 3-day battle, July 2nd, 3rd, and July 4th. Also, on those same days, the Battle of Vicksburg was fought under Union General Grant in one. This one was under Union General Meade. There were 165,620 soldiers as per tallied accurate counts. That's the approximation on both sides. If you include the wounded, killed, and missing in action, the total casualties for these 3 days was 61,902 people. In other words, in 3 days, that's more than the entire casualty count in the NOM. That war over slavery, either defending it or trying to end it, produced more casualties than all of the rest of the wars the United States has been in, whether that is World War I, Spanish American War, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, all of the stuff in the Middle East put together does not equate to the loss during the Civil War. Let's take Pickett's charge. Pickett was a Johnny Reb general, and the commanding Confederate General Robert E. Lee said, "General Pickett, I want you to take me that hill." And he said, "General, I don't think it can be done." He said, "I want you to take it." He said, "Set someone up to lead the charge." He said, "General, for something like that, I cannot have any of my men led by somebody else. I'll have to do it." Well, Pickett survived, but he went up that hill with almost 10,000 troops, and he came down about an hour and a half later with somewhere around 1,600 troops still walking. And all of these Johnny Rebs, most all of whom, except for a mere handful, didn't know what owning a slave was about because they were nowhere near owning one, but they died for the concept of supporting a system that was fundamentally built on slavery and eliminating them as anything other than defenders because they could not get labor in the South that they could get paid for And for the most part, they were filthy poor, in a filthy condition of impoverishment, but they thought they would die for it. So why would a slave be concerned about this? Well, he could fight, which happened because of the losses at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, etc., were so great that the Union Army decided to let the slave fight for himself, such that by the end of the war, 1/3 of the Union Army was made up of former slaves. And they essentially carried the war to its completion, and it could not have been won without them. But why would a Johnny Reb die for preserving the institution of slavery when he got not only no economic benefit from it, but was oppressed by it? Why would he die so heroically? Why would somebody who had a job in the factories up north die to end it, or even be part of a cause where he was so likely to die or be horribly mutilated with no anesthesia, no antiseptic, no modern surgical methods to relieve his pain or allow him to be operated on with some horrendous wounds that would take days to die from? Why would somebody do these kind of things? See, that's the side effect of slavery, what it does to the mind of the people who exist around and about it. And that still exists in this society right now. And the question is, what are we going to do about it? When are we going to start examining the aspects of it? And when are we going to start understanding that if people would fight to defend it, who got nothing out of it, people would die to attack it who didn't have any direct interest in it? Why are the descendants of those slaves still expecting that somebody's going to continue to do something for them when it is well within their power to exercise what authority, what resources, and what political clout and power they already have? We have the interesting spectacle of the Democratic Party being so vigorously defended by Black people, and the Democratic Party was the party of the slave owners. And we've got the same people who are so vigorously against the Republican Party, which was the party of the people that were dying to free them from the condition of slavery. Now, somewhere in here, somebody needs to make that make sense to themselves, even if you talk about the parties have flip flopped. So, if they flip flop from the slave owners' party to something else, it's flipped from that something else to being another something, which is the party of the rainbow cult, which is trying to destroy everybody by destroying the traditional nuclear family, womanhood, childhood, and manhood. So, what are we doing today? And why does it not make sense when you stand back and analyze all of this in a detached fashion? I pass the mic.
Yeah. I think Professor or the Negro had their hand up first. And then I'll go to Immortal, then Art. And then anybody else want to request to come up, please do so, because we've been up here already an hour and 33 minutes. And I don't want to stay up here too long tonight. So I could probably end this in another 30. So if you want to request to come up to ask a question or comment on the topic, please do so now. All right, so I would Professor, then Negro, then Immortal, then Art. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not gonna be long. I had a question for Judge. Judge, Attorney Alton Maddox had a really interesting. He really kind of. I saw a video with him, and he had something. He was talking about the meaning of emancipation with respect to the Emancipation Proclamation, and and according to Altomatics, I'm paraphrasing him, but he was saying that we really aren't free because of the definition of emancipate. What are your thoughts on that? Because emancipate has a different meaning and has a different legal meaning. So, what are your thoughts on that? Would you say that Abraham Lincoln freed us, or does emancipation have another meaning?
Emancipation Proclamation was a wartime measure to financially inconvenience the South. It only applied to the states in rebellion, and it wiped out their collateral and security and deep financial resources that they were attempting to use to finance the acquisition of arms in Europe. Frederick Douglass, the black man, had a lot to do with making that sink home to the Europeans by multiple speaking tours he conducted in Europe to explain things and act as an unofficial diplomat for the country. Is what it is. So where do we go from there? Where do we take it? By the way, emancipation has nothing to do with the reality inherent in today's world. You can say slavery is as legal as you want to be, as you want to say. But who's going to enslave a free man? Answer, no one. Because there are enough black people out there who would die rather than submit to slavery, even if there are a lot, particularly the ones you see in the news, who have a fondness for chicken and a fondness for the limelight. And I nicknamed them the Chicken Caucus, also known as the Black Caucus. Other than that group, there are a lot of black people that would make life in the United States, at least temporarily, a complete hell if anybody thought of rounding up black people and putting them on, shall we say, modern day plantation areas like they did with the Japanese in internment camps in World War II. So slavery is a state of mind, and it's well known that you cannot enslave a free man. You have to find a demoralized, defeated person if you want to do that. Or you have to have an interesting type of slavery that says you can escape your condition, perhaps. The Romans had that, but we did not, because there is a distinction that attends to chattel slavery. I'll ask this question, audience. How many kinds of higher order African ape can you think of? Can you name? Can anybody give me any suggestions as to what you would call the African apes as you see them? Anybody?
Would like to name the species, you mean,
Yes.
sir? Orangutan, silverback gorilla, Reyes. Well, I guess Reyes is a monkey, but
Orangutans off of the coast. Yeah, but okay, orangutan, gorilla, chimpanzee, bonobo, right?
bonobo. Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
right now there is a cute thing on X, which I was just looking at, and it shows all the children of a lot of species behave in the same way, and they're showing a baby gorilla. And they act like they're human. But you see, to some people in the country, the category of African ape includes a very peculiar animal. It's called the Negro ape. So if you ask somebody in this category, name the African apes, they would say chimpanzees and maybe bonobos, gorillas, and the Negro. So a lot of people look at us as subhuman. They're not animal lovers. They don't think we're cute. And you run into something that was on Twitter last week. if you had a choice between saving your family dog and a stranger, who would you sacrifice? Some people said the stranger, and other people said my family dog, because the stranger is a human. You have to understand that one of the bad problems with chattel slavery was that the subject was looked at as subhuman, a cute ape that could not only mimic humanity like gorillas and chimps sometimes, but could actually speak humans' language. And that is one of the problems. It is the dehumanization process where you have a large number of the people in your society acculturated to look at the African apes as chimps, gorillas, and Negroes. And Negroes are
And
fascinating.
just okay. Oh,
That's one of the problems we run into. So if I'm sure if the chimps organized and armed up and got military units of chimpanzees like they do in Planet of the Apes, the new edition of the Planet of Apes, or the gorillas, they would have an entirely different attitude toward everything. So watch that movie if you want some enlightenment. That series, that franchise, Planet of the Apes, not the old one with Carlton Heston and all that garbage, but the new one. And see what you
Professor, did
see.
you have a follow-up comment or question?
yes, ma'am. Well, first and foremost, Your Honor, I appreciate it. Like I never thought. I'm a historian, and I never thought about that the Emancipation Proclamation was in itself a weapon towards the South. That is interesting. It was a weapon. But the only follow up I had was it escaped my mind. You brought up. I got an interesting video to send you about an ape that found a weapon in Africa. That's a real video, but I'm a step back
Well, if
and
you remember, just let me know.
Come
And
right back up.
yes,
well,
ma'am.
he don't stay up here, but just raise your hand so I could come back to you. All right, let me go to the Negro, then Immortal, then Art, and then I'll come back to you, Professor. You remember, and anybody else don't request to come up, then we'll close out. Go ahead.
Yeah, I gotta push back on the notion to say that people's slavery around the world, like that we're not disenfranchised. Like when people make the argument saying, well, look at Congolese or look at these other people, it kind of neglects the oppression that we have here in a first world nation. And that's why I have a kind of a problem with this kind of rhetoric. We have police officers that are targeting our black folks. We're getting unjustly incarcerated.
Judge, I need you to mute.
Yeah, and they're using our labor and they're sexually exploiting our black people when they're behind these walls. We wasn't here by choice. These Congolese people, they're on their native land. They chose to cooperate with a group of people that's adversarial. We're two different issues, two different planes. And for us to compare that, I think that that is a false equivalency that leads into Pan-Africanism, that leads into this flat blackness rhetoric, which I think is really kind of deadly at this time frame when we're trying to delineate and trying to establish ourselves here in American soil, trying to gain power. I don't think that we should be as concerned about these other groups because when they come to American soil, they're not concerned about the first world oppression that we should go through. So why should we be concerned about the third world oppression that they go through, that they do by their own choice? See, we didn't come over here by a choice. We came here in shackles and chains. So it's a whole different.
Well, I think you kind of like replying to my statement because I'm not comparing their slavery to slavery that happened here in America. That's not what I was doing or said. What I'm saying is how all of us are participating. We have our hands in the wheel of modern day slavery when we feel as though our cell phones and other electronics is a necessity, going to what Art referenced earlier. We feel it's a necessity and we can't live without. So the more we buy these cell phones or different electronics, the more you're going to see people like in the Congo, the Congolese people, and other places throughout this world enslaved. So whether you want to say indentured or, because they get $1 a day or something that's like that, but what I'm saying is we have to recognize that we play a part in keeping modern day slavery alive. So that's what I was saying. So I'm not comparing, because slavery looks different here than it did, probably in Rome during the Roman times. But there are a lot of Muslims that enslaved Africans, probably more so than Atlantic slave trade. Nobody talks about the East African slave trade or the South African slave trade. But what I'm saying is, today in modern day times, the more we buy corporate necessities, the more we are playing into this greed of corporate monopolies that is partly that keeps going by the hands of people that are currently quote unquote enslaved.
And
So
I got to
that's what I
push
was.
back on that, because when there's a lot of our people that get wrongfully incarcerated, they go to jail. They're producing license plates. They're producing all types of things through slave labor on American soil in a first world nation. And yet still, these illegal aliens, they benefit off that labor. They illegally partake of those goods. Are they getting? And they have the nerve to bitch and moan about cutting a check, and that they don't want to put their money to reparations, but they want to come over here to the United States. No, I got to really push back on you hard on this, Dana. Respect. I love you.
Well, then we're going to disagree, because somebody that's in prison, under the 13th Amendment, they are still considered a slave because they're in prison. They're a criminal. They committed a
No, not
crime.
everybody. Wait.
So
Not all of our people commit a crime.
as opposed to, let me finish. As opposed, they were convicted. And majority of people in there, you're not going to tell me are innocent, because even if they took a plea deal, that means they pleaded to guilt. But the fact is that I'm not talking about people who are in prison. I'm talking about people who are not in prison. So when I use an example as what's going on in the Congo, and it's nothing wrong. It is nothing wrong highlighting injustices that are going on throughout the world, because you have to understand what is going on worldwide, and you have to understand history to see any progress or any change here in America. So it's not wrong with me highlighting a simple fact that, yes, you have a lot of Congolese people who you might as well say that's modern day slavery. But at the same time, if we did not buy cell phones or any electronics, will they need those people to do what they're doing? Would they be exploited? Now, there's another side to it, because there are millions of Congolese people who are being exploited, but at the same time, there is a thing called free will. So leave the Pan-Africanism to the side. Everything is not about Pan-Africanism or comparing and contrasting or trying to lump in somebody's experiences with your experience. What I'm stating is facts. And what I'm saying is the fact that sometimes we don't recognize the part that we play and the injustices that are going on today throughout this world.
May I add a little something on that mix? There's not a human being alive on this planet or any other animal of any kind on this planet that got to pick where it was born and under what circumstances. There was a man and a woman, or a male and female, that fucked. The female got knocked up, and after the period of gestation, something popped out the twat. And if it lived long enough, it did the same thing. That's what picked it, not the creature that was born. Nobody gets to pick where they were born. It's all involuntary. And it is a matter of chance where your consciousness decides to develop and what the circumstances are of the body that your consciousness develops in. That's philosophy. So the other thing about the 13th Amendment, There shall be no slavery nor involuntary servitude except upon due process of law as a punishment for a criminal offense. Guess what? That was only incorporating a principle that has long been a part of the criminal law everywhere on the planet Earth. When somebody incarcerates you, locks you up, puts you in a dungeon, in a jail cell, in a penitentiary, what happens, puts you in a penal colony run by France or England, such as Australia, which is now a rather prosperous country, but it was a penal colony. Your liberty has been restricted against your will because you did not follow the rules of your society and you're being punished. So anytime you get locked up, you are enslaved. That's nothing new. That has always been the case everywhere in the world. Now, is this uncomfortable statistic? Yes, there are people in jail who haven't done things that they should be in jail for. But the fact of the matter is, for the last 50 years, I've been practicing law or been a judge adjudicating the law or an arbitrator doing the same thing. Roughly 97.5% of all people in the penitentiaries pled guilty. 84 to 87%, depending upon the state, confessed. In other words, just about 2.5% were found guilty by a jury. Just 2 to 2.5%. That's a very small percentage. Most of the time, if you have cause to actually represent people who are subject to felony prosecution, you have innocent people who are innocent of violating the law, but it's not that they did not do something wrong at some point in time. And there are some who have done a lot of serious wrong, but because we have a principle in our system that says the freedom and liberty attended upon an ordinary citizen's condition is more important than the fact that somebody may commit a crime unless it gets too ridiculous, aka establishing probable cause that something breached the public peace, dignity, and order of the political unit. We find that there are, by design, perfect crimes that have to be allowed in this system if we are to maintain the principle of personal liberty and freedom. That we choose to, for the most part, commit sabotage upon our own interest and rob our neighbors, our colleagues, our relatives. We kill them, we pimp them, we rape them, we burglarize them, we sell poison to them. It's not like the people in jail have been doing Robin Hood type work, robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, because the people they steal from rob, rape, murder, and sell drugs to are their own neighbors. That is a sickness that makes it convenient for the kennel keepers to go down and keep the dogs from fighting in the kennels. If we want peace and prosperity, we have to be able to organize and utilize our resources. You take the Italians, you take the Irish, they set up organized crime entities, but the organized crime entities were not predicated upon preying on their own people. They went outside and they used their communities as safe havens to escape from as they went out and did what humans have been doing for thousands of years. You pull raids off on your neighboring enemies. You go steal their cows, their horses, their resources. You take their lives. You come back. But we do this not outside of our enclaves. We do it inside the places where we live. So that is something that is a product of the slave mentality. I do not hold it against an African because he says it's very crowded where I live. I don't want to be in a place where the sewer is an open ditch. I can't get a cold beverage. I've got bugs crawling all over, eating everything up, and it's filthy and dirty around here. I like my comforts. I'm moving over here where I can exploit the political situation. If there are some damn fool Negroes that live there that want to bitch about me being here, screw them, because they've had every opportunity to exploit this great circumstance and they don't know how. So that's not my problem. They're just some savages who happen to be over there and don't know how to civilize and take advantage of the opportunity. So I will. You see, that's how people think. And rather than getting worked up about what somebody recognizes about weakness inherent in the former American slaves' mental observations and gymnastics, learn and put it to use so you no longer think like, act like, behave like, expect like a slave. That's one message I'd say that they bring with us. But I mean, do what you got
All
to
right.
do.
Sit tight,
Well,
Negro.
I just want to comment on. I won't even use the prison aspect. We could just point to online, right? And how our women are getting picked off because of online sex trade and stuff like that, and they're getting butchered as a result of these type of things. So to say that we have our own atrocities here in a first world nation that has not been quantified.
Y'all went quiet on me. Anybody talking?
Yeah, I don't. Can you hear him? You can't hear him?
No, I'm gonna leave.
All right. I feel like we have first world issues that have not been quantified when it comes to our community, and for us to put resources on a whole nother community and put emphasis on what they might be going through when they're not advocating themselves, I feel like we're doing ourselves a disservice. We need to extract every little resource, every last bit of our advocacy, because we have a righteous cause and a claim. They don't. That's why every group wants to have us on their side. So that's what I'm going to just end off with.
Sir,
Okay.
what you're
I
saying
want to go
is profound. That is wise because everybody says, let's give these Negroes a song and dance and they'll support us. We don't have to give them a damn thing. These people over here are more important. They don't even live in this country, but let's go support them because it may give us an increased reputation or an enhanced reputation in the world. We don't have to deal with the American Negro. They're a big bunch of damn fools who don't even understand what a bargain is. They give their power away. Let's exploit them.
All right. I want to go to Immortal.
Oh, I appreciate it. And so many things have been said since I rose my hand. Uh, uh, Let me start where I was going to start in the first place. And I appreciate the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. And even though I don't always agree with everything he says, I see where he's going with it. And a lot of us, we venerate people like Neely Fuller Jr. And if you listen to Neely Fuller Jr. long enough, and if you listen carefully enough, everything he says is trying to force you to say, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, you can say this person is doing this. Yeah, you can say this person is doing that. What are you going to do about it? Because Neely Fuller Jr. say, bring about a situation where they forced to either do right by you or kill you on off. If you haven't listened to him, go listen to him. And Judge Joe Brown has a different way of bringing you around to that. Like, what are you going to do about it? So I preface my disagreements with that. So what I got to say about, first of all, the Civil War and the Union soldiers, the white ones, and the Johnny Rebs. Now, the Union soldiers, you ask all questions solved through problems and questions and answers. All problems solved that way. So you ask a good question. Why would they do all that? If they seemingly they don't benefit from slavery, why would they risk life and limb and go through all this? Well, it's because there was a draft. That's first and foremost. Most of these people who, especially in the Union Army, weren't there because they had an epiphany that they were going to go out here and save some Negroes. They got drafted. And when that draft was instituted, there was a backlash against Black Americans because of it. There was wholesale murder, looting. I think they even looted an orphanage, stole everything out the orphanage for the Black kids, and all this. After that was before that was when the draft got started. Now, when the war ended, many of these Union soldiers were responsible for what happened in Mississippi, the Devil's Punch Bowl. Now, as far as them being separated from slavery, you say they never owned a slave. Okay, when cotton was king, tobacco, sugarcane, rice, all these things was king, the Northerners was making money off of it too. Yeah, it was being grown primarily in the South, but you had based off of us too, Wall Street. Wall Street's based off of us, though. They was just trading human beings, stocks, bonds, all kinds of commodities off our backs. So the broker of the commodities profited off of slavery. The railroad company that transported on tracks that we built, that transported the goods and services, benefited off of slavery. They didn't have to own a slave. The insurance companies who insured. So if you were just a lowly insurance man, never owned a slave, I bet you insured some then, didn't you? Okay? If you was a lowly banker, just a humble soul, but you're in there giving loans on slaves. This what we went through touched every point in the economy around here. Whether it had been education, name all 10 areas of human activity. Our intellectual property and our physical labor was used to benefit. And when Lincoln said that, if I could restore this union and leave the Negro enslaved, I would do that. But if I have to free these Negroes to restore the union, I'm going to do that. There was a couple of northern states that took him up on his offer to say, because the people think that Emancipation Proclamation freed Negroes all over the country. It didn't. It didn't free Negroes in Missouri, and it didn't free Negroes in Kentucky. They allegedly fought alongside the Union and so that they can maintain their slaves. And they did for a long period of time. So this notion that this nation went through this great upheaval over the question of slavery, slavery was a pawn in that whole thing. It had to do with power. Where was the power going to be centered and things of that nature? So when I hear, some of these Caucasians, well, my so-and-so died at this to save. No, he was drafted. He got a pension. He was paid. The consensus among all those people were that we don't care nothing about these Negroes. We really just want to, have our union. That was the consensus. After slavery, you put us in the Devil's Punch Bowl. This is the North. Not to mention what the South did. They had the plantations ready to put us right back in slavery using sharecropping and other things. Mississippi didn't fully abolish slavery until 2013. So they had every other apparatus set up against us. So much for I think I'll land it there for the Civil War part of it. The Civil War part of it. Now, Dana was making a point about slavery and our complicity in it, and saying that we're complicit. Oh, before I get to that point, I want to tackle the point of the mental state of Black Americans, as the judge have pointed out. Now, this part I agree with Judge when he says the harm that comes to Black Americans from other Black Americans is crazy and it's outrageous simply because of the situation that we're in. No other people on the planet are in this situation that we're in. And so we're going to have to do some things that no other people on the planet have done. And you know what no other people on the planet have done? Made it so that the criminals and the bad element among them attack primarily other people. White people, 90% of the time, if a white person is robbed, shot, stabbed, mistreated, it's going to be by another white person because they live in proximity. Same with the Asians. Same with the gangsters you was talking about. Now, they did to a greater degree export some of their nonsense, like you said. But to even get the power to export the nonsense, first thing they did was went around to the mom and pop Italian stores in the neighborhood they say they was protecting and began collecting extortion. And these are the businesses that they would use to launder their money. These are the businesses that they would burn down to get the insurance. These are the business they run all kind of scams through. And the mobsters will tell you themselves that most of the time when they got into it, they was killing other mobsters for the most part. Now, it was always the wayward civilian that'll get caught up in there, but for the most part, they were killing other mobsters. So on the one hand, no other group, every group, the criminal element always affects that group within it because of proximity. That's who was around you. But I do think that for us to look at that and say, well, we don't have to do better is crazy because of the situation that we're in. We can't afford to be like that. We have to have where anybody doing something to us, it's only 50% or less of the time it's one of us. And then the other 50% or more is from somewhere else. And then we bring about that situation, we can do better. Now, the point about contributions to slavery, that's a sticky one. And I can see both of y'all points, but I kind of look at it like this. Cotton is being sold all over the world right now. Even though if you're buying it from the United States, you're probably not getting it from chattel slavery. I don't know what kind of slavery it is that might be delivering it to you, but it's to prove that you can sell cotton without enslaving people. You can sell cell phones without enslaving people. The profit margins on these cell phones are astronomical. They're outrageous, the profit margins. There's no reason why these corporations can't pay the people who are mining the goods, the people where all these materials are coming from. There's no reason why they can't be living a real decent life right now, other than narcissistic greed. So I get it. If I go to a restaurant, I pay normal price for the food. It's great. And I keep going to that restaurant. And then I come to find out that the restaurateur, he steals all his meat from the grocery store every weekend. He got a hookup in the meat department. They're going to push it out the back door. He going to go get it. And then, so now you're going to say I'm a thief because I went to his restaurant? I didn't have nothing to do with none of that. And obviously the authorities ain't stopping him. What, am I the police now? No, I just went to buy a meal. But now once I become aware of what he's doing, now there's a moral thing I could go with. I could go with the morality to say, nah, I ain't gonna eat this stolen meat because, it's stolen meat. I can try to put that on myself. I can see that argument, but there's also the argument to say, hey, look, why don't you just go buy your meat just like everybody else and sell it for a reasonable profit and let's do it like that and I'll buy your food. So on the one hand, yeah, if I wanted to hurt them for what they're doing to them people over there, then I wouldn't buy their product. But don't blame me for what they're doing to them people over there because they can pay them. There's no reason. It's not a necessity to enslave them over there. It's just greed. They're just flat out greedy. And I don't have nothing to do with that. I'm just buying a product or a service. But like I say, if you want to inflict punishment on the people, you don't like it to the point where you want to punish somebody about it, then don't buy the products. But don't blame me if somebody else is being enslaved, especially as a Black American, because that ain't even how we do business. We don't do business like that. So don't blame me if somebody else is doing business like that and I'm buying their products. No, I never signed up for that. And usually, like we did with Exxon, I can give you examples, like we did with Exxon, where they was mistreating the South Africans. They down there in Mandela, everybody jumping and getting mowed down and different things like that. You say, no, you know what we're gonna do? We not Exxon, Mobil, or one of them gas companies was from out of South Africa. We said, nope, we ain't shopping there. Not only that, we're gonna put pressure over here. Not only that, our entertainers are gonna sing about it and put pressure that way. Are you gonna ban us from there? We don't care. We started issuing out consequences and punishments. So we know how to do it. But send somebody from the Congo, everybody over here from the Congo, they saying what you say, Judge. Well, y'all have been over here all this time and y'all ain't did nothing, so we just gonna shit on you like everybody else do. Well, now I'm gonna buy a cell phone then, and work it out the best way that I can. Since you didn't come here to help, you want me to do something different to help you people over there get out of slavery, and you blaming me for the slavery I was in. And the last thing I'm gonna land with is, whatever condition that we're in as a people right now as Black Americans, it's not because for the lack of trying. I think a lot of times our worst elements are presented as the norm. I know we got it's a lot of pimping and hoeing going on. It's a lot of drug dealing and drug using going on. It's all kind of things. A lot of thieving and robbing and killing going on. But that's a small. Most of the people who are doing that belong to a sub culture in the Black American society. That's a whole little subculture. They spread most of the venereal diseases. They spread most of the drugs. That
Immortal Honey, I need you to start landing. I'm getting,
okay.
come on.
Well, that's it then. I appreciate
it. Thank you. All right, Art, and then we're gonna close it out because I gotta get ready to go out of town tomorrow. Go ahead, Art.
Yeah. I don't know what people's expectations of this governmental institution. But what did Shakespeare say? Expectations is the root of all heartache. So if you got some heartache, it's probably related to your expectations. Stop expecting shit from this institution that enslaved your ancestors. Everybody complains about these institutions. They complain there's no accountability. The media don't take accountability. The lies they tell the voters don't take accountability for the fucking politicians. The politicians don't take accountability for the laws they make, and the police don't take accountability for the laws they enforce. But they want to preach accountability to the average non-voter who pays taxes. No wonder what does it say? Voter turnout, they're expecting to hit historic lows this election season. Trust in government is at historic lows. It's all fun and games to talk about politics until people's families start starving. So, when shit hits the fan, non-voters are the majority of the population, the plurality of the voting population. Voters gonna have to take accountability at some point, or somebody's gonna have to. The media, the politicians, somebody, right? Like somebody's gonna have to take accountability at some point. And so I don't trust the government that ain't taking no accountability for slavery after 150 years. I don't recommend white people do it. Thomas Paine wanted people to be equal. Didn't he leave? He got kicked out of this country. That's a white man, ain't it? During anti-federalists pushed back against the constitutions and told them to F off because they were farmers. Then you had Bacon's Rebellion, where Indians, black people, and white indentured servants and Indians and black, worked together. So then the labor movement, that was a black-white multiracial movement, led by anarchists nonetheless. You know what the government did? Killed a bunch of anarchists they knew didn't commit the crime, in the DA's words, to save their institutions. So if they'll slaughter white people, they'll slaughter their women just so they don't have rights. What do you think they're going to do to you? Hell, some could argue the state slaughtered Jesus. So I just don't see where people's expectations for this entity is very high. And when you ask people, who's the enemy? Well, just some white Casper the Ghost boogeyman. And so when you don't know the enemy, you start looking at your neighbor. And that's what happens in the black community, because nobody really has a logical enemy. And the ones that finally do say, I'm going to pick the government as my enemy, well, the rest of the masses don't back them. Black Panthers, MLK, just name a few. So I don't know. Again, let's land it here. Expectation is the root of all heartache. Stop expecting shit.
Okay.
Let me make some remarks here. We're teaching today. Okay, politics.
Well, we're about to wrap up soon
it'll
because
be.
this can't be no
It
long
won't,
lesson
it
than that.
won't, but it's necessary. People say they don't want to deal with politics, but anytime you have 3 or more individuals who have to interact with each other, family, friends, business associates, neighbors, you have a political process because 2 of them are going to overwhelm 1. So it's a process of who joins up with who to make the 2 against 1 to make the 3. That's politics. Next thing, it's a matter of mindset. Over a 10-year period, they did this study when I was on the criminal bench. They were astonished to find out that I had reduced the recidivism rate in my courtroom over that decade from the statewide 80-some% recidivism rate down to just 18%, and it was dropping. What was I doing? It was taking the defendants and apprising them or showing them what was going wrong with the way they were approaching life and to give them a purpose and cause. Once they got that, they straightened out. And 25 years, 30 years later, they come up and thank me about turning their lives around. Now, ideation. One of the most popular movies that came out for the Black culture was The Woman King, another which is the highest grossing superhero movie of all time. Black Panther came out. Walt Disney and ABC were going broke. I won't go into why, but they needed cash flow to pay down some outstanding interest that had accrued. They put Black Panther out there where the penultimate scene is Black women and Black men of the same tribe trying to kill each other in open warfare, and that got the crowds of Black folk cheering on. You had the remarks of Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, W.E.B. Du Bois were put in the mouth of the villain, and people were cheering when he got done in. We have Woman King that glorified the creatures who worked for Dutch slavery, enslaving millions of Black Africans over what turned out to be a 250-year period. And we celebrated those horrible bitches that were trying to get insinuated into the money-making process of the whole thing, and we made them heroes. It's horrible. Now, next thing that we have to deal with is that if we're going to change the slave ideation, we have to recognize it for what it is. When you get off of this X space and you go look through X, just take a good look at what you see and who's concerned in making big deals and getting thousands of views or interactions off of trifling bullshit that doesn't make a damn bit of difference. And then meanwhile, stop and pay attention to those who are actually talking about stuff that makes a better tomorrow, or at least analyzes it, or at least expresses some concern with the operative conditions of life in the United States, whatever side they're on. And I would submit most of the people that are on this space right now would probably fit into that latter category. But do reflect on how one of the things is to get folk fed and distracted so they will get their minds off of what others do in the political process. Now, we have a thing here. Modern technology has replaced the utility of slavery. You have machines, mass production machines that are agriculturally oriented that'll do stuff that once took thousands of slaves to do. We have an economy that depends upon technology, because without that technology, the number of people that are currently alive on this planet could not exist. They'd starve. So it is the 21st century. Let's do what we have an opportunity to do, and that is get in on this science, technology, engineering, and math, aka STEM, STEM, so we can get into the 21st century on the ground floor without 15, 20 different floors stacked on top of us, where we can ride the elevator to the top and get somewhere where we have a product, an idea, a service, or something that does have an economic viability in the world that is now developing thanks to high technology, artificial intelligence, and a very ubiquitous spread of computerization. So we have that. We have the concept that one of our callers just touched on, and I find it interesting because it is an important one. We have a manifest conception in our community that criminality is somehow normal to Black people. It's not. It's an anomaly for all people, which is why it's universally punished. Now, we have to stop dealing with stuff where we have no responsibility for the morality involved. That is the thing that I put in the heads of my people that in a way that will make you do miserable time. But if you do what I do, then 10, 15 years from now, you'll come back and thank me, which is exactly what's happened. It's an ideation thing. You have to start thinking as a free person. The world is a dangerous goddamn place to live in, but we can deal with it. We can handle it well. We're at the top of the goddamn food chain. So act like it instead of running around whining about what's going wrong with your situation. We can do any damn thing we want, but we have to start thinking like a free people, and we don't belong to any damn body. We are not a domesticated animal wagging our goddamn tails because somebody gave us some kibbles and bits and scratched us behind the ears and say, oh, look at the poor girl, look at the baby boy, or whatever it is. We have to start acting like a free people. We don't belong to anybody. We vote according to what we will get as tangible benefits, even if we hate who we're voting for. Be effective. That's what everybody else does. They don't give a damn whether they like somebody or not. That's a full feminist piece of bullshit. You don't need to like somebody if he's a badass. You got money, you want to bet on the fight, or you going to bet on the guy, oh, he's so nice, or the one that can knock somebody out before the first round is up. That's what we need to learn how to do. And we can do that, but we have to start developing the mindset of a free people. And that includes the rest of the folk that are non-Black in this country who are about to find out what it is to have been in our condition as a minority. Because there are problems that some jackasses are putting in place because they have a cult. I'll call it the rainbow cult. It's a quasi-religion that they're trying to impose forcibly on the American public that has no values, no duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, accountability, duty, no bravery, no courage, no sense of purpose, no morality, no ethics, no cause, no sense of shame or guilt. And that is not how humans can prosper. In order to do something, you have to have standards and you have to understand their consequences. So we have to stabilize ourselves, go to our center, and we can do it. We can do any damn thing we set our minds to. But if you put your head in a vice that says, I'm a slave on a damn plantation, I can coast along and do as little as I can do because I get nothing out of what comes out of my labor. Somebody else does. Then you are a fool if you think like that in the 21st century, because that's exactly what will happen to you. You think like a slave, you'll be treated like a slave. Your consequences will be that of a slave. So think like free people. You can do any damn thing you want to, but it requires courage, bravery, dedication, and damnably hard work and application, study, research, and the ability to do what's necessary to condition yourself mentally and physically to do what's needed. That's always been the formula for success on the planet Earth. And it does not elude us if we put our minds to it It is necessary that we go there because we will not prosper until and unless we do. Now, I'll land what you say, the airplane hell I passed to Mike. That's all I got to say for this now.
All right. So conserving, you just came up. You can say something, but can you kind of like make it quick? Then I'm gonna go to Professor. I'm asking Professor to make it quick, and then I'm gonna close out because I gotta get ready to go out of town, and I'm getting tired. Go ahead,
Thank you,
conserving.
Dana. Judge, I love everything that you just said. And I wanted to ask you, I went to go see Jordan Peterson a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how people need to worship something, whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, adult content, or whatnot. Where do you think religion kind of plays into like steering us in the right direction, where we're doing, I guess, the right thing and following all those really good, lofty goals that you just spoke about? Like, should we? He was saying like we should be worshiping the ultimate good, which is pretty much God. You know, how do you feel about something like that?
I think people prosper most when they become confident in their own guidance systems. Now, I'm not talking against religion. I just know that religion is, in fact, as Marx described it, an opiate of the people. Sometimes the people are in pain and they need a painkiller. The problem is that whereas the opiate becomes necessary and appropriate in extreme pain, if administered too frequently and over too long a period, it addicts people to a system where they do not perceive themselves as personally responsible. They look at themselves as corks on the water, blown by the winds of chance, perhaps directed by prayer, rather than being creatures of free will. That is not good for anybody's success because it generates a mental condition of helplessness. That's not to say there's anything wrong with religion. It's just that it should be taken in its proper course rather than becoming something upon which one is fixed. Everything ultimately will rest on your shoulders. Otherwise, there would not be the concept of hell, which is, hey, you do wrong, you pay for it one way or the other. Whether you deal with the hell is what happens incarnate upon your existence on the planet right now, or what you think is not going to be your pie in the sky type thing after you die. There's a sense of accountability and consequence that has to be interjected into this whole process. It is best when a person deals with it on his own. Now, I made an informal survey over a number of years. There is great truth to this old saying that good people sometimes do bad things. Bad people often do bad things, but for pure evil, you need religion. I did surveys and I asked everybody that I sentenced to deal with their answers to a series of questions. I found that the most religious people did the worst things that backed up that old saw. I found that agnostic people did not tend to do things that dealt with fundamental dishonesty to others. They tended to do stuff like maybe write a bad check in extremis, or they maybe got in fights or something like that. I found that atheists tended to be the most frequent offenders with stuff that was called crimes of moral turpitude. In other words, crimes of poor character, lying, embezzlement, stealing from those that you had an obligation to act responsibly toward, violating their fiduciary responsibilities, or as a trustee for somebody that wasn't them. So I will quote Minister Louis Farrakhan on something I heard him say early one Sunday morning in 1976. He said, some people will not understand what I am saying. He says, there are four states of mankind. There is the pagan savage who has no standards, who does everything based on a whim without care for the consequence to others. That is one. That is the lowest condition of man. The second lowest condition of man is the religious person who does things based on a fear of eternal damnation. The third category of person, which is next to the highest, is the intellectual person who attempts to guide his conduct by his own personal standards of right and wrong and makes a continuous assessment of his behaviors based on his personal values and his desire to commit himself to what is right. The highest state of mankind is the spiritual man who has been an intellectual man long enough so that he now walks in the pathways of righteousness. What does he say? Instinctively, because it's automatic. He does the right thing as a matter of habit. So I think that would explain the thing about religion. In other words, it's better than having no principle at all, but it's not as good as having personal principles. And it's not as good as a pattern and practice of righteous behavior that leads one to behave appropriately all of the time as a matter of conditioned reflex. So I'll just offer up what Minister Farrakhan said, and that was almost 50 years ago.
All right, thanks. Professor, you had your hand up? All right, so I'm gonna close out because I'm tired and I still have to get ready to go out of town. But I will say this: I do appreciate this Tuesday space that the judge holds because it more so falls under critical thinking and a lot of political science. So I do. Can you mute it for a second, Judge? So like I do appreciate Shut Up Saturday Weekend Review. That's not critical thinking, but it's fun. People do come together and they do bring up stuff what happened during the week. You know, it's back and forth discussion. It could get ratchet or not, or arguing or whatever. Um, and you know, it is what it is. So every space is for every purpose. But I will say one thing about this particular space on Tuesdays that I do want people to, you know, just kind of get it embedded in their heads is Tuesdays is for critical thinking. And, you know, we think every day, all day. Sometimes we choose not to because you need to decompress. But, you know, how often are we critical thinking on certain issues, whether it's slavery, whether it's the protest that's going on here, whether it's our government or whatever. So I kind of want to shape these Tuesday spaces that the judge holds as vital critical thinking space. And I really want to appreciate everybody that came up to speak because even before the judge came up, Kanye, everyone, Man Cave, you know, everybody contribute a lot of value to this discussion. So it was a lot of heavy critical thinking, which is not really popular. It's something that is not a trend. And maybe we need to make that great again. Let's make critical thinking great again. So I appreciate all the speakers. I appreciate everybody listening. Um, please share this space. Go to Judge Joe Brown website, jjbbbq.com, and buy you some barbecue sauce. You could get it on Amazon. Just type in Judge Joe Brown barbecue sauce. And we reached 100K on YouTube. Subscribe to the Road Dane on YouTube. And we'll be back next week, Tuesday, here on X with more Critical Thinking Tuesday. Yeah. So close us out, Judge.
Well, I've already talked enough. I'll just say be strong, get your mind strong, get your body strong, and get your resolve strong. Do not go along just to get along. And we can get somewhere. We can do it. And white, black, brown, red, yellow. Keep this in mind. Everybody came out of Mother Africa quite dark. They migrated up. Some went to Asia, got yellow. Some went to Europe and got white, quite light. Some went from Asia and became not yellow, but red. Some moved from Europe who were white, came to America, white, got with some black that got brought over, got back with some red that was already here, and it became brown and came back on into being humanity. So we're all from Mother Africa. So white, black, brown, red, yellow, there's a fundamental connection. And the smaller this world gets and the larger the population becomes, the more we come back to the center of what we all are.
All right. All right. So with that said, everybody have a wonderful week, and we'll be back here next week, Tuesday. And stay safe, stay blessed, and stay positive. All right. Good night. Bye.